Welcome to the Hidden Orchard Podcast, a radical exploration of spirituality, science, and the Bible from a Jewish perspective. Each week we'll look at a new topic and dive deep into the texts that inspire and enrich our lives. So whether you're a seasoned expert or just curious about a topic, there's something for everyone. So sit back, relax, and we'll get to today's episode in a bit. But first, if you haven't done so, visit thehiddenorchard.com and subscribe. It's free, and you'll receive access to content and weekly emails. There you can also subscribe for a paid membership and get access to everything on the site and be the first to hear about online study opportunities where you can meet and interact with other people on the journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you have an idea for a topic, reach out to me at thehiddenorchard.com. Now, let's get to today's episode. Are all religions generally the same at their core, just another path to the Creator? It's a controversial topic, and it's what we'll look at in this episode. Where some see differences, others find commonality. Whether it's the prayers and customs of Native Americans or shared ideas across various Eastern religions, it does seem that some common ground exists in many religions. But is it coincidental, or is it evidence of syncretism or some kind of crossover through time? Further, what are we to do with this information? Years ago, these very questions led me to speak with an Orthodox rabbi who lives in Israel. He's a well-respected teacher for a well-respected organization. And at the time I connected with him, he had just returned from a trip to India, where he completed a course on breathing techniques and meditation. To his surprise, and mine, he found many commonalities, specifically the arrangement of patterns and the affinity between the Sephirot and the chakras. Regarding the crown chakra, which is the highest of that arrangement, the most common arrangement, it corresponds to the Sephirot of Keter, which again, in the Sephirot tree of life, is also the highest. The teacher told him, "We really don't know what to say about this one." The rabbi replied, "Neither do we." And I find this somewhat comical because most of the Kabbalists have nothing to say about Keter. It's too far outside of our comprehension. So even that's interesting. Not just the pattern, but that certain of these patterns are off limits. In conversations with my neighbors, many of whom are from various parts of India, I'm often surprised at how easily the language of Jewish mysticism opens doors of understanding to the deeper aspects of our shared spiritual concepts. Through many conversations like these and studies, I've learned two things, to say the least. Number one, most of us modern Western people misunderstand the nature of Eastern religions, maybe religion in general. And two, many core Eastern ideas indeed align with the Torah. But there's much more to this story. For those of you who aren't familiar, visit thehiddenorchard.com. This is an article that I have more information and citations on inside, and you can follow the show notes to get to this article. So what do we do with this information? Jewish tradition suggests that all religions once shared a single source of truth through Adam, which makes sense. But over time, that knowledge branched into the various faiths and religions that we know today. Many times these branches diverged far afield into idolatry, some further than others. But then there was Abraham, not as the founder of a new religion, but as the one through whom the Creator selected to redirect humanity back towards that original source of truth. Abraham was given a very messianic task to restore humanity to what it once knew, but had forgotten. He trusted the plan and gave up everything to see it through. Now the Midrash tells us that Abraham naturally saw the corruptions of his culture. He perceived that all things were subject to decay, and that idols made of wood and stone were nothing more than created objects. In other words, he knew there was more. Yet he still saw the sparks of goodness, perceiving the unity of a living source behind everything. The faith traditions that descended from him were never intended to be formal religions of boundaries, as we see them today. These were intended to be more of a passed-down tradition of how to return to the oneness of the Creator, that original source. And the mitzvot, musar, ethics study, and mysticism, these are all ascending levels of returning to this original truth. Now, Scripture tells us that Abraham and Sarah spent much of their lives telling others about the Creator. The sages tell us that they made monotheists of pagans. In a sense, they became the spiritual parents of many people. So it's therefore not surprising to find many cultures possess shared beliefs, such as the existence of a creator, an afterlife, sacred texts, practices and rituals to enhance consciousness, and a moral code of some type. Many of these moral codes actually have some overlap with the Noahide laws as well. And some have even suggested a connection between Abraham and the high caste of the Brahmins in Hinduism, with similarity in names being only one of several connections. This is where it's a little interesting. Genesis 25:1 tells us that Abraham remarried after his wife Sarah had died. The rabbis tell us that his new wife, Keturah, is Hagar from earlier in the texts. With her, Abraham fathered more children. Genesis 25:6 tells us that he gave these children gifts and sent them to the land of the east. In several places, we understand these gifts to at least have been monetary. But Jewish tradition mentions that among these gifts given to the children of the East were gifts of knowledge, which included ancient mystical secrets, astronomy, meditation, practices for holiness, and much more. And it's not surprising because Jewish tradition maintains that Abraham had attained a lot of this supernal knowledge from his connection to the Creator. This is why the work Sefer Yetzirah is attributed to him. But in other words, Abraham's descendants carried with them the fragments of this original spiritual wisdom. Though without the covenantal framework of the Torah, that would come later, and the oral tradition, it's only natural that these ideas would drift over time. In the Zohar, Rabbi Abba tells about his encounter with this wisdom of the East. And indeed, he remarked on the similarities and deep ideas shared with the Torah. The text goes on in the Zohar to discuss a few of these teachings at length. Though similar, he warns that these teachings are still downstream from that original source material. And as we know in the spiritual world, any deviations that exist are problematic. Corruptions can introduce risk and spiritual danger. Yet there's still an interesting connection here to modern times. Fast forward a bit to the Holocaust. Absolutely a devastating time for the Jewish people. For the survivors, picking up the pieces and moving on was nearly impossible. In my own family, the anger resonated for generations, and still does. Many people could not overcome the anger and the grief enough to want to seek or teach about God. Some Jewish people would no longer touch a Bible, own a Bible, and it seemed the Torah pathway was not an option for many. On this tragic situation, Rabbi Zalman shared a teaching from his friend, Reb Shlomo Carlebach. He said, "So what did God do? There were some people from the Far East in India, Japan, and Tibet who could teach us about God the Most High. They came to America, and many Jews turned to them in order to have a connection to God." So this is a really interesting idea. Obviously, in certain circles, this would be dangerous. But we are getting an idea that God's working in an unusual way here. From the 1950s and well through the 70s into modern times, new doorways were open for people to experience spirituality through a new, but maybe not so new, lens, Eastern traditions. It's been suggested that the children of the East merely returned the ancient gifts from Abraham to his descendants during their time of greatest need. Now, through this pathway of Eastern religions, many found their way back to Torah. And along this journey, we were connected with many lost traditions, such as biblical meditation and spiritual ideas that we ourselves had forgotten. So here's the way I take this. It goes without saying that not every spiritual path is kosher, nor am I saying that all religions are interchangeable. Yet when looking at history, it's difficult to ignore that God seems to be playing the long game with humanity. Each of us is on a unique journey, and he is patient. When we wander or when we need a new doorway, he plants sparks and hints, fragments of truth along our many pathways, to lead souls back toward him. In our time, the modern resurgence of Kabbalah and its coalescence with the emerging sciences is also part of this plan. Hidden teachings that were once veiled and incomprehensible are now unlocked and being made accessible for all through a number of mediums. It's an amazing time. In this light, the Creator's hand becomes visible, as he guides the world closer and closer until we're ready for a collective elevation back to the source. That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this topic. Remember, you can find more information at thehiddenorchard.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. We don't really engage in marketing, so it's word of mouth and references like that really help spread the word. Also, I want to say thank you to those who subscribe to the site and those who support the Hidden Orchard Project financially. Without you, it wouldn't be possible, so thank you. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.